I never thought an ordinary evening could redefine everything I knew about desire, intimacy, and compassion. But it did. It happened on a crisp October night, when the ocean breeze had begun to chill, and the city lights sparkled like diamonds floating in a glass of champagne. I, Allison Montgomery, 40 years old, was sitting behind the wheel of my pearl-white Bentley, the scent of Chanel No. 5 still lingering on my wrist. A scent I always wore to remind myself that I was untouchable. I had just left a launch party for a couture collection, dresses so expensive they could buy a home, paraded on girls who looked more like porcelain dolls than people. The flashes popped, the martinis flowed, I smiled, posed, laughed. It was all a performance. And like all performances, when the curtains closed, I was left with myself, an aging, divorced woman who had everything, except someone to go home to. I drove slowly down Wilshire Boulevard, passing boutiques still glowing late into the evening. A part of me didn't want to return to my house. That oceanfront mansion, as elegant and sterile as a showroom, had never felt more hollow. I turned on the radio, searching for a jazz tune to match my mood. The soft moan of a saxophone filled the cabin, lazy and melancholic, like a glass of red wine poured slow and deep. That's when I saw him. Beneath an overpass, in the shadows between the glittering blocks of the city, he stood, a homeless man. He wasn't holding a sign. He wasn't begging. He was just there, standing with his hands in the pockets of a torn jacket, staring out into nothing. His hair was long, his face weathered, a scruffy beard catching the light in pieces. But it wasn't any of that caught me. It was his eyes. His eyes were mine. Or rather, they reminded me of mine. When I'm alone, truly alone, without the noise, the makeup, the expectations. There was sorrow there. But pride too. The kind of look that says, life has broken me, but I'm still standing. It was the gaze of someone who had loved, lost, and still had something left to fight for. None of the powerful men I dined with ever had that look. I don't know why I hit the brakes. The light had already turned green. Horns blared behind me. I rolled down the window. The cold air slipped in, carrying the scent of night, and him. I opened the door. "Are you hungry?" I asked, my voice softer than I'd expected. He turned slowly to me. "I'm hungry, but not for food." I froze. That answer cut through me, like a knife, a blade into something buried so deep inside me. I forgot it was there. A craving, not for luxury, not for validation, but for something raw, something real. "Get in," I said without thinking. He hesitated. "I don't think you. I decide what I think," I interrupted. He climbed in. The car moved forward. We were silent for a few minutes. I didn't look at him. I just felt him. His presence so unfamiliar, yet so undeniably alive. He smelled like sweat, dust, city pavement, like a man who hadn't bathed in days. And yet the scent wasn't repulsive. It was honest. It made me feel oddly awake. "What's your name?" I asked. "Eli." "How long have you been out here?" "Stop counting. Counting makes you start hoping. Hoping's dangerous." I glanced at him. He didn't return the look. His gaze was fixed ahead, stubbornly proud. My throat tightened. "Do you want to be somewhere else tonight?" Eli turned to me. "You mean, I don't want to go home. And I want to be near someone who isn't pretending." He didn't speak for a moment. Then slowly he nodded. I took him to a quiet boutique hotel I frequented when I needed to disappear. The room was dim and warm, draped in gold light, and wrapped in crisp white linens. A private balcony looked out over a bamboo garden. I entered first, then turned to see him lingering at the door, like a man who'd stumbled into a dream he didn't believe belonged to him. "I didn't bring you here out of pity," I said. "I brought you here because I saw you." Eli swallowed hard. He slid off his coat, revealing a wiry frame, sun-browned skin, and tattoos I couldn't yet read. I walked toward him and placed my hand against his chest. His heartbeat was pounding. I leaned in and whispered, "I've been a fantasy for so many men. But tonight, I want to belong to someone who never even dared to dream of touching me. And I want you to touch me. Not like I'm rich. Not like I'm powerful. But like I'm a woman aching." He didn't reply. He just closed his eyes. And I saw a single tear roll down his cheek. I kissed it. Not out of sympathy, but because I knew, even dreams deserve to feel real. It was quiet in the hotel room. That kind of quiet that only comes with thick velvet curtains, luxury sheets, and the distance between two people who have not yet touched, but know that they will. I stood by the window, my heels still on, a glass of chilled white wine in my hand. Eli sat on the edge of the bed, unsure, like a man who had accidentally stepped into a dream that might collapse at the slightest move. The city lights bathed us in a soft amber hue, and I saw him staring, not at my face, but my silhouette, the shape of my waist through my silk blouse, the slow movement of my breath. There was a kind of hunger in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Not the kind that wanted to own me, but the kind that wanted to worship me, that terrified me, and thrilled me all at once. I took a sip, then placed the glass down on the table, the cool stem making a soft sound against the marble. I turned to him and began to unbutton my blouse, one button at a time slowly. I wanted him to watch me. I wanted him to feel every second of it. His lips parted slightly. The silk slipped from my shoulders like water. Underneath, I wore nothing but a soft lace bralette, ivory-colored, barely there. My skin, pale under the soft light, seemed to glow against the contrast of the deep shadows around us. I stepped closer to him. He didn't move. "Touch me," I whispered. "Like you've imagined. Like I'm real." His hands hesitated. They were rough. You could feel the days he'd spent gripping cold concrete, the nights curled up beneath newspaper blankets. But when his fingertips grazed the curve of my hip, I shivered. He was gentle, reverent, as if every inch of me was sacred. I guided his hands to my waist. He looked up at me, as if seeking permission to go further. I gave him a nod, and he reached around, undoing the clasp of my bra with surprising delicacy. It fell to the floor like a feather. My breasts, round and full, rose and fell with every breath I took. His eyes locked onto them, like they were the last source of light in his world. "I used to dream of women like you," he said, voice husky. "But in my dreams, they'd always disappear before I could feel them." "Then don't waste this one," I whispered. He leaned in slowly and kissed the curve of my left breast. Not with lust, but awe. I closed my eyes as his lips moved across my skin, tracing lines no one had taken the time to explore in years. His tongue circled around my nipple, gentle at first, then more insistent, as I tangled my fingers into his hair and let myself feel, truly feel, what it meant to be wanted. I straddled him, my skirt bunched up around my thighs, my stockings rubbing against the denim of his worn jeans. I could feel him grow hard beneath me, his arousal hot, insistent, real. We kissed. God, did we kiss? Not the kind of kiss that's choreographed or polite. No. This was messy, hungry, and perfect. His tongue explored my mouth like it had been waiting a lifetime to taste me. I moaned into him, grinding gently, letting him know I wanted more. That I needed more. I reached between us and unbuttoned his jeans. His breath hitched as I slid my hand inside, finding him already thick and heavy with desire. When I freed him, I heard him curse softly under his breath, not out of vulgarity but disbelief. "You're shaking," I whispered. "I've never been this close to heaven," he said. I smiled, then pulled away just long enough to slip out of the rest of my clothes. I stood before him, completely naked, owning every curve, every line, every imperfection. This was my body at 40, not the body of a 20-year-old, but one that had lived, given birth, broken, healed, and still burned. He reached for me, as if he couldn't stand the distance any longer. When I pulled his shirt over his head, I saw the marks life had left on him. Scars, bruises, tattoos faded by sun and time. His chest was lean, his abdomen firm but not defined. The body of a man who had survived, not sculpted. I pushed him back onto the bed, slowly climbed over him, my thighs straddling his hips, my palms on his chest. "Let me ride this dream," I murmured. And then I sank down onto him. He gasped. His hands gripped my waist like he was afraid I'd vanish. I moved slowly, letting him feel every inch, every tight, slick second of being inside me. His eyes rolled back as I circled my hips, my hair falling over my face, my nails dragging down his chest. I rode him with purpose, not just for release, but for reclamation, of my womanhood, of my desire, of the power of my own body. Each thrust sent waves through me, pleasure building like a tide I couldn't hold back. His hands moved up to my breasts, squeezing, stroking, worshipping. I leaned down, kissed his neck, bit his shoulder. I wanted him marked by me, branded by me. And then he flipped us, with surprising strength. Eli turned me onto my back, pinning my wrists above my head as he entered me again, deeper this time. His pace urgent but still tender. "You feel like salvation," he whispered into my ear. I moaned louder, my thighs locking around him as he moved faster, harder, every thrust sending sparks through my spine. I clawed at his back, whispered his name, begged for more. And when I came undone. It wasn't just an orgasm. It was an awakening. It ripped through me, wave after wave, my cries muffled against his shoulder, my whole body trembling beneath him. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. Not because of what he did to me, but because of what I allowed myself to feel with him. He followed moments later, burying himself deep inside me, groaning against my neck like he was breaking open. And then silence. Just breath, sweat, skin against skin. He collapsed beside me, and I curled into him, our bodies tangled, no longer strangers, not quite lovers, but something unnameable. "You were never a dream," he whispered, brushing hair from my cheek. "You're real. Too real." I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because in that moment, wrapped in the arms of a man who had nothing, I felt like everything. I woke before the sun. The light hadn't yet crept through the heavy curtains, but the soft hum of the city below was already stirring. I lay still for a moment, soaking in the silence, the scent of him still on my skin. My body ached, in the best possible way, but it was my heart that felt fuller than I could explain. I turned over and looked at him. Eli. He was sleeping on his back, one arm loosely draped across his chest, the sheet barely covering his hips. His chest rose and fell in a slow rhythm, peaceful, almost boyish. For a man who had likely spent years on the edge of survival, he looked impossibly serene in that moment. That's when I noticed the scar. It ran across his left shoulder, long and faded, but still visible in the morning dimness. I hadn't seen it the night before, too caught up in the heat of things, too lost in the way he touched me. But now I saw him more clearly. The body of a man who had lived, who had endured. I wanted to trace it with my finger. I wanted to know the story behind it. And strangely, I wanted to know all of him. I sat up quietly and slipped on my robe. The fabric hugged my skin, still warm from his. I walked to the window, pushed the curtain aside, and watched the city wake up. The blur of taxis, the blinking traffic lights, the people who, unlike me, had slept alone. I had brought a stranger to this room. A man I met by chance, on the cold sidewalk outside a luxury boutique. But what happened between us didn't feel like chance anymore. It didn't even feel reckless. It felt inevitable. Behind me, I heard him stir. "Morning," he murmured, voice rough with sleep. I turned to face him. His eyes were open now, squinting against the dim light, but already filled with something that made my heart skip, softness. "Hi," I said softly. He sat up, rubbed his face, and then reached for the sheet to cover himself a bit. I smiled at the gesture, shy, even after what we'd done. I walked over and sat on the edge of the bed. I saw your scar, I said, reaching out to brush his shoulder. His body stiffened under my touch. It's okay, I added quickly. You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to. But he looked at me for a long moment, then let out a sigh. The kind that feels like it's been building for years. No, he said. I want to tell you. He pulled the sheet around his waist and leaned back against the headboard. I could see the change in his eyes, the way they looked distant now, like he was staring into the past. I used to build houses, he began. Carpenter. Framing mostly. My hands weren't always this dirty. Back then, they were calloused in all the right places. I smiled faintly, imagining those same hands now. The ones that had traced every inch of my skin hours earlier. I was married once. Her name was Jo. We met on a job site. She was delivering coffee for a catering company. I made some dumb joke about the coffee being too hot, and she rolled her eyes, said, "Then drink it faster, sweetheart." I knew right then I was gonna marry her. His voice broke slightly, and he cleared his throat. We had a little apartment in Queens. It wasn't much, but it was home. We were happy. I worked long hours, came home covered in sawdust, and she'd still kiss me like I was the cleanest man in the world. I could hear the love in his voice. And the pain. What happened? I asked gently. He looked down, his fingers tightening on the edge of the sheet. She got sick. Cervical cancer. Fast. Aggressive. We didn't have insurance. I took every job I could, but it wasn't enough. We lost the apartment. I moved her into my sister's basement. She didn't want to die there, but she did. I reached for his hand, and he let me hold it. After that, I couldn't go back. Not to carpentry. Not to anything. I just unraveled. Slept on couches. Then benches. Then nothing. There was a long silence. I didn't speak. There was nothing I could say to fix that kind of loss. All I could do was sit there, my fingers woven through his, and let him know he wasn't invisible. When he finally looked at me again, his eyes were glassy. I haven't told anyone that story in years. I nodded. Thank you for telling me. And then for the first time, I kissed him like a friend. Soft. Quiet. Without heat. Without need. Just presence. And he kissed me back the same way. That morning, I didn't feel like the woman who had made a reckless decision. I felt like someone who had met another human being. Someone broken, yes, but still whole in a way most people forget how to be. I ordered breakfast. We ate it side by side on the bed, half-dressed and laughing over strawberries and flaky croissants. He didn't know which fork to use. I didn't care. He had honey on his lip, and I licked it off without thinking. There was a sweetness between us now, not the kind that comes from lust, but from honesty, from the kind of intimacy that lingers after the bodies have stopped moving. At one point he leaned back and just stared at me. What? I asked, laughing. You're not what I expected, he said. Neither are you, I replied. He reached out and touched my cheek. Last night, I thought it was a dream. But this feels more real than anything I've known in years. And in that moment I knew. This wasn't just a one-night story I'd tell to my girlfriends over wine. This wasn't just about sex or pity or thrill. This was a chapter one hadn't seen coming. One that would challenge everything I thought I knew about desire, vulnerability, and what it means to feel truly seen. I saw him again the very next day. It wasn't planned. I told myself it wouldn't happen, that what we shared was a single beautiful mad night, the kind that should never be repeated, precisely because it was perfect in its imperfection. But there he was, waiting outside the same cafe where we'd first locked eyes. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair was unruly, and his eyes, those unguarded molten brown eyes, looked straight through me like they'd been searching. Allison, he said, like he couldn't believe I was real. And I, in my sleek black dress, Heels that clicked like I meant business. A bag worth more than what most people make in a month. I just smiled. Like the girl who had let him take her apart in silk sheets was still lingering beneath the mascara and tailored elegance. Coffee? I asked, my voice almost teasing. He nodded slowly. Yeah. From that moment we were something. Not a couple. Not lovers in the traditional sense. But something more tangled. More dangerous. More alive than anything I'd known in years. I started seeing him regularly. I made excuses to myself at first. Said I was checking in on him. That I just wanted to be sure he was okay. That I didn't want him to vanish like smoke. But deep down I knew the truth. I craved him. Not just his body. Though God knows that was part of it. His touch was fire and desperation. He kissed me like he hadn't eaten in days. He made love like a man trying to carve a home inside of me. Every time we undressed, it was as if the world outside ceased to matter. I felt undone in the most exquisite ways. But it was more than that. I craved him. The man who still apologized when his hands trembled. Who never quite believed he deserved to be looked at the way I looked at him. So I started bringing him into my world. I took him to a quiet little barbershop tucked away on 14th Street. The barber, an old friend, looked at me curiously but said nothing. I watched from the leather couch as Eli sat in the chair, his eyes darting around like he didn't belong. But when the cape was draped around his shoulders, and the scissors began their slow, careful dance, something shifted. His face came into sharper focus. The hard edges of him softened just slightly, and I saw what had been hidden under the dirt and dishevel. A man who was beautiful in ways that had nothing to do with polish. Later I took him shopping. He didn't want to go into the store at first. He stood outside like a boy being dragged to Sunday school, arms crossed, a scowl on his lips. I'm not your project, he said gruffly. I'm not trying to change you, I replied. I just want to see you. His jaw tightened. You do see me. Then let me see all of you. He hesitated. Then finally he followed me in. We didn't buy designer suits or custom shoes. Just a few shirts, clean jeans. A black jacket that made his shoulders look even broader. He changed in the fitting room and stepped out like a man coming out of armor. I watched him in the mirror. The way he stood taller, like maybe, just maybe, he was starting to believe he belonged in the reflection. That night, back in the hotel suite I now reserved under a name only he and I knew, he didn't undress me gently. He peeled my blouse off with urgency, his mouth on my neck before I could catch my breath. His hands roamed like he needed to memorize me again and again. You smell like sin, he whispered against my ear. Then sin with me. I moaned, pulling him onto the bed. The sheets tangled beneath us as we kissed, deep, open-mouthed, ravenous. My fingers dug into his freshly trimmed hair. He kissed my breasts like he'd missed them all his life, suckling one, then the other, until I was gasping his name. I guided him between my thighs, hungry for him. He slid inside me slowly, watching my face the entire time. There was something reverent in his stare, like my body was a temple he was finally allowed to worship in. Our bodies moved together, hot, slick, messy. But more than the rhythm, it was the emotion between us that undid me. We didn't just F***CK that night. We connected. Again. Deeper. But outside our cocoon, whispers had begun. My friends started noticing the change in me. You've been distracted lately, said Jenna, my oldest friend, as we sipped wine on my terrace one evening. Have I? I replied, knowing damn well I had. You've missed 2 board meetings. You skipped Martha's gala. And don't think I haven't noticed the mysterious smile you wear these days. I said nothing. She leaned closer. Is it a man? I hesitated. When I didn't answer, her face changed. Allison. Who is he? I could have lied. Should have maybe. But I didn't. His name is Eli, I said softly. She waited. And, he's not like the men we usually know. Her brow arched. How not like? I took a deep breath. He was homeless. He still is, technically. I met him on the street. The silence that followed was deafening. "Allison," she whispered, stunned. "Are you out of your mind?" "No," I said firmly. "For the first time in a long time, I think I'm finally sane." She stared at me, horrified. "You're risking everything. Your name. Your status. You think the press won't eat this alive if they find out?" I shrugged. "Let them." Jenna grabbed my hand. "This isn't just a fling anymore, is it?" I shook my head. "No, it's not." Her eyes softened, but only slightly. "Then be careful. Love is dangerous. But this could destroy you." Maybe she was right. Maybe I was dancing on the edge of ruin. But when I lay in bed that night, replaying the way Eli touched me, how he spoke to me like I was human, not some ice queen wrapped in diamonds, I knew I didn't care. He didn't care about my legacy, my last name, or the weight my family carried in the city. He just wanted me. And I wanted him. Wild. Broken. Beautiful. Not to fix. Not to tame. But to love exactly as he was. I woke up to silence. Not the quiet kind that wraps around you gently, like a soft blanket. No. This was the kind of silence that presses down on your chest. That tells you without words that something is wrong. The sheets beside me were cold. Eli was gone. At first, I thought he'd just stepped out. Maybe to get coffee. Maybe just for some air. He did that sometimes, restless, like his body had forgotten how to stay still for too long. I waited. 15 minutes. 30. An hour. I called his name softly through the suite, even though I knew he wouldn't answer. By noon, I was pacing the room, phone in hand, fingers trembling. By dusk I knew. He had disappeared. And with him, something inside me collapsed. The days that followed were unbearable. I searched everywhere. The shelter downtown. The little park bench near the fountain where he used to sit. The soup kitchen I'd once seen him lingering outside of. I even walked the streets of the city in heels I couldn't feel anymore, praying I'd catch a glimpse of that familiar silhouette. That walk. That wildness in his eyes. But he was nowhere. I left notes at the front desk of the hotel. Gave the clerk a photo. Tipped him $1,000 to call me if Eli ever came back. I checked every day. Twice a day. For weeks. Nothing. At night, I'd sit in the bed we'd shared, the pillows still faintly smelling of him, and replay everything we'd said. Everything we'd done. Had I scared him? Had I crossed some invisible line when I bought him those clothes? When I started asking about his past? When I told him he mattered? Had I made him feel owned? The thoughts tore at me like claws. And still, the worst part wasn't the questions. It was the ache. Because I missed him. Not the version of him I'd tried to clean up. Not the man in the crisp black jacket. But him. The one who looked at me like I was something holy. The one who kissed my scars and didn't flinch. The one who, for one fleeting second, made me feel like I could stop pretending to be strong all the time. I was unraveling. I stopped going to charity galas. I skipped board meetings. I stopped answering Jenna's texts. My assistant began tiptoeing around me like I might break if she spoke too loudly. And maybe I would have. Because nothing, could fill the hollow space he left behind. Not the wine. Not the designer sheets. Not the late-night distractions with men who whispered compliments I didn't believe. They didn't have his voice. They didn't touch me like I was real. It was a rainy Tuesday, 3 weeks after he vanished, when I finally broke. I was sitting on the floor of my walk-in closet. Yes, that closet. The one every magazine had once raved about, surrounded by silk blouses and patent leather heels. I was holding one of his old shirts. A gray, frayed thing he'd left at my place once when he changed. I pressed it to my face like it was oxygen. And I sobbed. Not the dainty kind of crying women in my circle know how to do. I wept. For the loss. For the longing. For the fact that someone like me, rich, educated, always in control, had fallen in love with a man who had nothing to give but his soul. And for the fact that his soul was all I ever wanted. When I finally crawled into bed that night, exhausted and hollow, I stared at the ceiling for hours. I kept thinking about the last thing he'd said to me. We were tangled in sheets, bodies slick with sweat, his hand resting on my hip. "You scare me sometimes," he whispered. I turned my head, surprised. "Why?" "Because you make me feel like I belong somewhere." And then softer. "I haven't felt that in a long time." I hadn't answered then. I'd kissed him instead. Deeply. Desperately. Like maybe that would be enough. But now, lying alone, I wished I had said it. I wished I had said, "You do belong. Right here. With me." Days passed. The city moved on. But I didn't. Every man I passed with a scruffy beard made my heart lurch. Every time I heard someone say the name, Eli, I flinched. I began carrying his shirt in my purse like a madwoman. I would touch it when the meetings got too cold, when the nights got too long. And then one evening it happened. I was leaving the hotel. The place where we became, whatever it was we were. It had become a shrine of sorts, both sanctuary and torment. I had just stepped out into the evening air, the sky heavy with clouds, when I saw him. Across the street, half hidden in shadow, hair longer again, clothes older. But him. Eli. I stopped breathing. My heels froze on the pavement. The world blurred around me. Cars passed. People moved. But he didn't. He was staring at me, like he wasn't sure if I was real. I took one step forward. He turned as if to run, but then stopped. We stood there, strangers again, but not really. And then slowly he crossed the street. The moment he reached me, I reached out, hand trembling, and touched his chest. "You came back," I whispered. His eyes were wet. "I never left," he murmured. "Not really. I just didn't know how to stay." My throat closed. "Why did you go?" He exhaled shakily. "Because I thought you deserved more than me." I shook my head. "You don't get to decide what I deserve." He looked down. "I don't know how to be the man you need. You already were." Silence. Then finally he whispered, "I missed you so much it hurt." I closed the distance between us and wrapped my arms around his chest, pressing my face into the hollow of his neck. "I don't care about perfect," I whispered. "I just want you." And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt whole again. He slept in my bed that night. Not like before, though. He didn't reach for me, didn't pull me close. He lay on his side, facing the window, his back to me, like the weight of coming back hadn't fully settled in yet. And I didn't press. I just watched him breathe. The next morning, over coffee that had long gone cold, he finally spoke. "Allison," he said slowly, like each word came from somewhere deep. "If I stay, I need to do it my way." I looked at him. The stubble on his chin, the small scar above his brow, the weary light in his eyes. They were all so familiar, and yet suddenly felt miles away. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I can't live off you," he said. "Not forever. I can't sleep in silk sheets and pretend it doesn't twist something inside me. I need to work, to earn my days." "You don't owe me anything," I whispered. He shook his head. "That's just it. I want to owe you nothing. I want to deserve you." That sentence broke me. Because he didn't understand, he already did. We found a small woodworking studio in a quiet part of town. It was dusty, half abandoned, but had strong bones. The kind of place most people overlooked. He lit up when we stepped inside. The smell of sawdust, old timber, sunlight filtering through broken windows. It was like I watched him breathe fully for the first time. "This," he said softly, touching the worn wooden counter, "feels like mine." I helped him rent it. Nothing flashy. No contracts. Just enough to get started. And then I stepped back. I didn't buy him tools. I didn't redecorate. I didn't hover. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. because everything in me wanted to fix things for him. But love, real love, isn't fixing. It's witnessing. So I witnessed. He came home late most nights, hands raw, splinters in his fingers, smelling of wood and effort. Sometimes he was quiet. Other times he talked for hours about grains, textures, custom orders. I listened. I let him teach me things. He made me a chair once. Rough, unpainted, solid oak. He didn't ask if I liked it. He just brought it home and placed it near the window. "This is yours," he said, "to sit and read, or think, or just be." I cried when he wasn't looking, because no one had ever made something with their hands for me before. But not everyone understood. One night, over wine and soft jazz, Jenna came over. She looked at him across the room. His jeans faded, shirt rolled at the sleeves, a smear of glue on his arm, and she smiled tightly. Later, when he went outside for a smoke, she leaned in. "Allison," she said, "you're playing a dangerous game." I raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "He's not from our world." "I'm not sure I like our world that much anymore." She sighed. "Be careful. Loving a man like that. It comes with weight." I wanted to scream, because she didn't know the weight he'd already carried. She didn't know how it felt to be kissed by someone who saw your loneliness before your lipstick. But I didn't argue. I just poured myself more wine. That night, I climbed into bed beside him and ran my fingers along his back, over the shoulder blades, down the spine. Soft. Slow. He turned to face me. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. I just needed to touch something real. He smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. "You always can." And then we made love. Not like fire, not like hunger, but like home. Gentle. Certain. Unrushed. His hands moved like he was remembering me, like he'd studied me once, and was retracing the map. And I let go of all the voices that said this couldn't be real. Because it was. In that bed, in that hour, in that man, I had found something no money could buy. Belonging. He started to change. Not into someone new, but into someone fuller. He shaved more often. Got a little stronger. Started whistling while he worked. He told me stories about his late wife. Not because he missed her more than me, but because he trusted me enough to carry her memory. We had fights, sure. About space. About money. About the past. But we always found our way back. He never said "I love you" easily. But when he made me a bookshelf without asking, for the novels I always left half open on the floor, that was love. When he memorized how I took my tea. When he held me during my mother's surgery. When he touched my knee gently during boardroom calls just to say, "I see you." That was love. And slowly, the ache of his absence became the joy of his presence. Not perfect, but real. One evening I asked him quietly, "Do you regret coming back?" He looked at me, brow furrowed. "Do you?" I shook my head. Not even for a second. He leaned in and kissed me, soft as breath. Then no regrets. I wrapped my arms around him and rested my cheek on his shoulder. And for the first time in years I knew. This wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was earned. I didn't think it would spread so quickly. At first, it was just a few glances. Curious looks at the cafe when Eli and I walked in. A few whispered comments from women I used to attend charity galas with. Then a post on social media. A photo of me holding hands with a man in a worn carpenter's shirt, captioned with a not-so-subtle line. "From CEO to Cinderella's project?" I laughed when I saw it. A sad little laugh. Because I knew, the moment my story left my hands, it wouldn't be mine anymore. Eli saw the post a few days later. He didn't say anything right away. Just put the phone down and stepped onto the balcony, lighting a cigarette. I followed him. "I'm sorry," I said, standing behind him. "I should have known this would happen." He turned to look at me, squinting against the late afternoon sun. "You don't owe anyone an apology." I stepped closer, placing my hand on his chest. Are you angry? He was quiet for a moment, then shook his head. No, just not used to being seen like I'm a stain on your life. I breathed in deeply. I used to be like them, I admitted, believing everything had to be beautiful, perfect, polished. Then I met you. He chuckled, pulling me into his arms. And you threw away your reputation for a dusty carpenter. I buried my face in his shoulder. No, I chose freedom. But freedom comes with a price. The following week, I was invited to an annual businesswomen's summit where I used to be a keynote speaker. Powerful, elegant women, all sharp smiles and sharper whispers. I brought Eli with me. He wore a crisp white shirt I'd gifted him, hair neatly brushed. But he was still Eli. Calloused hands, fearless eyes, and a grounded calm no one in that room could replicate. We walked through the lobby, and the air almost stopped moving. A former close friend approached, Amanda. Perfect golden waves, every strand in place. A smile sharper than glass. Well, hello, Allison, she said, her eyes grazing over Eli before returning to me. I heard you've been pursuing more grassroots philanthropy. I squeezed Eli's hand tighter. No, I'm just living honestly. Amanda raised a brow. Well, let's hope you don't lose too much along the way. I didn't respond. I didn't need to explain my life to someone who stopped understanding what a real heartbeat sounded like. That night, Eli asked, "Do you regret it?" I turned to face him in bed, under soft sheets and a golden nightlight glow. No, but I'm scared. He brushed his hand down my cheek. Scared of what? Of losing everything I built, just because I dared to love someone the world doesn't approve of. He was silent for a moment, then whispered, "You're not losing anything. You're rebuilding. With real bricks this time." And I held him tight, as if his body was the only thing left solid in my crumbling world. Then came my family. My younger brother, David, the only one I still spoke to, invited me to lunch. He looked at me like I'd told him I was moving to the moon. "Do you know what people are saying?" he asked. "Of course," I said. "What do you think?" David sighed. "You're smart. But love isn't about being smart, is it?" I sipped my coffee. "No. It's about courage." He studied me. "Do you think he loves you?" I smiled. Not because of the question, but because the answer had always been clear. He loves me in a way no one else ever has. David nodded. Then, "I hope you're not wrong." Eli started getting regular orders. Some from my friends. A silent way of saying, "I don't understand you, but I respect you." Some from total strangers. I saw him light up every time he finished a piece. His eyes shone like a child who finally got their kite to fly. One afternoon, he brought me to his workshop. On the wooden table, bathed in soft evening light, was a small box. Hand-carved. Subtle, beautiful. I opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper. One simple sentence. "I don't need anything else, as long as I have you." I cried. Not because of the words, but because I knew that for Eli, a man who once slept on sidewalks, who'd lost everything, writing that was a vow. Our love was no longer a secret, but it didn't need to be explained. We learned to live under curious eyes without letting them blind us. We held hands in public. We laughed at the not-so-innocent questions. We made love every night, as if tomorrow wasn't promised. Not to prove anything, but because it was the one thing that still felt utterly real. One night, Eli wrapped his arms around me while I shampooed my hair. Warm water trickled down my back over his hands. He leaned in and whispered, "You know, if you hadn't stopped your car that day, I probably wouldn't be here." I turned to face him, looking into those deep, steady eyes. "And if you hadn't looked up, I'd still just be a lonely woman in a beautiful house." We kissed under the shower, water and tears blending. It wasn't lust anymore. It was a recognition that two people who had lost everything had somehow found everything in each other. I still remember that night. So vividly it plays before my eyes like a film I can't turn off. The city outside was alive, golden lights flickering through the sheer silk curtains. I sat by the window of my high-rise apartment, glass of untouched red wine in hand, watching Eli as he stood by my wooden desk, the one he had built himself. His back was bare, the soft waistband of his trousers resting low on his hips. Each movement of his muscles told a story, one of labor, strength, and something deeper I hadn't dared name. I had grown used to seeing him like this. Raw. Real. A man who didn't fit into my curated world of boardrooms, tailored suits, and polite smiles. A man who had simply shown up, with all his broken edges, and somehow made everything make sense. I don't think I've ever loved anyone this way. And it terrified me. That day, I received a call from the executive board, a powerful investment firm where I held one of the top seats. Allison. The voice on the other end was calm, polished. You know we respect your personal choices. But the media is raising questions. Our investors don't like questions. I knew that well. I had once been the one making those ruthless cuts when someone became a PR problem. We'd like you to consider stepping away from your executive position. Quietly. You'll retain your shares. We just need some distance. Distance. I hung up without saying a word. I looked over at Eli, still working intently, unaware that the world I had spent years building was starting to tremble beneath me. That night, I told him everything. No tears. No drama. Just the truth. Laid bare like a confession I had rehearsed in my sleep. Eli didn't say anything right away. He just sat there, watching me with that quiet gaze of his. Then he took my hand. I don't want you to have to choose, he said softly. Not between me and the world you built. I shook my head slowly. But I do. He bent forward, kissed the back of my hand. Then choose for you. Not for me. Not for them. We made love that night like the world around us was on fire. There was no hesitation. No pretense. Just bodies, desperate to memorize every breath, every touch, like tomorrow might steal it all away. He lifted me into bed. No words. Just lips, hands, and the heartbeat of something too big to name. I felt the calluses on his palms drag over my skin. Not gentle but grounding. Honest. We tangled ourselves beneath the soft lamplight. And for the first time in my life, I saw myself in someone else's eyes. Not the perfect version the world demanded, but the real one. Vulnerable. Desiring. Alive. The next morning, I woke before him. The light spilled across his face, peaceful in sleep. I watched him and knew, if I walked out of this apartment and said, I choose Eli, my life would never be the same. I went downstairs to the living room, opened my laptop. The email from the board was still there. I opened a new document and typed my resignation letter. No tears. No second guessing. Only clarity. I would no longer abandon myself for the approval of strangers. A week later, I held a press conference. Dozens of cameras. A pristine white dress. I stood in the lobby of a 5-star hotel, where I'd once toasted mergers and closed million-dollar deals. I'm not resigning because I've been forced to, I said into the microphone. I'm resigning because I've chosen love over reputation, truth over performance. And if that makes anyone uncomfortable, perhaps it's because we've all been pretending for too long. No one spoke afterward. But that afternoon, I received a handwritten note from a former colleague. It read, "Thank you for being brave, for all of us who aren't ready yet." I came home. Eli was there waiting. No flowers. No fireworks. Just warm eyes and arms that pulled me in tight. "I knew you'd choose this," he whispered. I smiled into his chest. "No. I chose you." That day I pulled over for a man sitting on the curb. I'd already chosen. We kissed. Slowly. As if promising each other again and forever. I lost the reputation. I left the power behind. But I found myself. And I found him. Eli, the man who was once homeless, now lies beside me each night, head on my arm, whispering small things that keep my heart warm. He once dreamed of touching a world that felt impossibly far. And I brought that world to him, not with wealth, but with my body, my heart, and my life. I'm no longer the woman they once knew. I am Allison, a woman set free, and deeply, undeniably in love.